Oh my god, a Zorga Top Springfest! How did this happen? I can already hear y'all now. He must have sacked, hit his triggers, or he got carried. His teammates must have won all the games. But if you're in the know, it's not quite the case. Is this deck a sleeper? Well, let's talk about it.
This is only the beginning.
Hello everyone, my name is Kevin, aka the Paradox Twin from Team Ham, and I'm bringing you my Zorga Deck Profile. I'm going to talk about the deck, why it's relevant, what's going on with the deck, and how it can win games, and ways that you should build the deck, and other options that you should be using, and how Alchemagic works. But first, let's give a shout out to a YouTube channel that's been doing a whole lot of work for Zorga. If you have not been watching his content, I recommend you check it out. The channel's name is KCTCG. He is doing an amazing job with Zorga, and I really hope he releases his shuffling video because I gotta know how he's able to run so many low ratios and constantly see his cards. But let's talk about the Springfest deck as well. So if I can, I'll post an image of his deck log here, and he does not run Bell, which is surprising to me. I definitely thought he would be doing that, and he's running a bunch of GDRs, which is fine. It is what it is. If you don't run Bell, of course you want to have more GDRs. Swing big. So after I watched Casey's videos first, I actually made some changes to my deck build that actually mirrors what the guy was using when he topped. I don't know who this person is. Congratulations to you for making first with Zorga. I appreciate it. This is definitely my favorite Stochea deck out of the three right lines that are currently out in the United States. So I was so inspired by Casey's video, I decided to bring this to a major tourney that happened in the Houston area called Clash of Nations, which is hosted by my team leader. At the last one that just happened, we had 66 players turn out. I personally didn't do that well. I will post a comment below if you wish of how I personally performed. I'm not going to talk about it in the video, but I will bring up certain situations that happened throughout the tourney and the reason why I changed some of the cards that I did. So first, let's explain how Alchemagic works. So let's just say that these two are orders. If I choose to play this one from hand and this one sitting in my drop zone, I declare the activation of this one from hand, and then I bind this one from drop zone, and now this one gets the bound card's effect. So literally, imagine me just peeling the effect off of this and slapping it onto this card, because that's what just happened. So now, the way this resolves is a 4-step process. I now pay cost for the other effect, resolve this card's initial effect, and then resolve the other one's effect. And if there's any effects that resolve with a cost where a card moves, say it gets bound, which will come up later, whichever is the active card from hand is the one that will move. And if you have a weird interaction where two different cards are telling a card to move, whatever is the first spot it goes. So if it says bind this card and the other effect says soul charge this card, whichever one resolves first will move the active card to where it needs to go, and then the other one, do as much as you can, applies. Effects in Vanguard do not fizzle in most situations. So let's move on to the right line. You gotta run the ghosty fat boy here. You gotta run him. If you're gonna run Zorga, come on man, you gotta go for the complete image here. Don't run some other random starter for Stochea. Rancor Train, an amazing card. There's a reason why most Stochea decks are running this in its right line. Being able to draw 2 for a Soul Blast 1 is gigantic. And pitching one order or pitching 2 cards with Zorga, the reality is you're pitching an order. Like, you have to brick really hard to not have at least one order in your opening hand. And then after the draw 2 and the draw for turn, and then potentially the additional draw off the starter, if you go second, like, you got really unlucky. And then plus on rear guard it gains 2, so it's a decent rear guard. Huss allows us to salvage that order back that we milled for this effect, which is fantastic because now you're literally not actually paying a cost, you just drew 2. And then he's a nice rear guard. He swings for 15 on rear guard if you played an order. Remember, both their effects say if you played an order, so they have early game potential. They don't need to see Alchemagic. Now the last card of the deck. for the ride line, that is, Zorga. So he is an amazing grade 3. He has 2 effects. First is continuous Alchemagic, which explains in text how Alchemagic works. You can read that if you wish. Search up his effect. I understand my quality isn't the best. Then his other effect is Counterblast 1. You can call a normal unit from your drop zone back to field. So this is fantastic because we have a lot of on-placement effects that we want to be resolved before we Alchemagic. So you can already see with this ride line, we have a lot of early game advantage. We're out resourcing our opponent on rip. Now, let's talk about triggers. The favorite trigger of Stokea, our rainbow trigger himself. This is fantastic. The main reason why this card is so overpowered is because I get to choose where the crit goes. This is fantastic. So if I feel that I need to put a crit on a certain rearguard, I can. Really amazing card. The only one I think that's more broken than this one is the Brandgate. I run 4 copies of this hill trigger. Hills are really big. There's a reason why Team Ham is HAAM, which stands for Hills are anti-meta. You gotta resolve hills. But with the Zorga's playstyle, it can be hard at times to actually successfully resolve your hills. So for me, I personally like to pray that they stay in the deck until later, because then when it actually comes up, it'll be me pretty much 5th or 6th damage healing on my opponent. Now, I don't run draws in my build. I know that there's decks that run draws. I understand why. You gotta see your pieces. And plus, the new 10k draws are nice for shield blocking. But I'm gonna run fronts here. I do still value fronts. This is a deck that only has 3 attacks. We don't have multi-attacking, restanding, crazy garter string. The most powerful card we have is a card that gains crit. But besides that, our effects aren't that impressive. So we need to go tall. Hitting a front can really fuck up your opponent's guard patterns. And then I run 8 crits for vanilla for the effect. I'm not worried about the difference from 4k to the 5k. I don't think that matters too much. There's just times where you might need this soul charge. Very few, but you just might need it. Being able to have these many crits in the deck, plus the over trigger being a pseudo crit, is fantastic, because there are situations where your opponent decides they have to risk it and no guard the Vanguard, and then you just punish them by flipping crits. Unless they can match you and defensively start hitting triggers, this can really press that early game pressure onto your opponent, where they either A, lose all their pieces and they have a very terrible grade 3 or grade 4 turn, or they just get flooded and now they're questioning if they even have the shield to block your 3rd or 4th turn. Now onto the most important part, folks. Orders. This is a deck based around Alchemagic. You need to be resolving orders. So I run 1 Spiritual Body. So I think running 2 or 3 is fine. That's fantastic. You know, if this works for you, do what you gotta do. But for me, this game has a very small window for this card to really be impactful, and then otherwise it will just be if I can afford it later and I don't have any other options, I'll do this, or this is my only order in hand kind of scenario. But this card pops off the hardest on your grade 2 turn. Outside of that, it's not so useful anymore. Yes, it's Soul Blast to call. We also have to remember that one of the strongest decks in format right now is Prison, which can literally just say, hey, you don't have a soul anymore. So this could become useless really quickly. Now, I run 2 copies of Unnatural Death. So once again, there's people that play this at 2, 3, or 1. I understand why you're doing it, do what you gotta do. I played as 2 because at that tourney I talked about in the beginning of this video, I damage checked this in one of my matches. You don't want that. When a card that says you can salvage 2 orders and you can't do that anymore, and the reality is you're not going to heal it anytime soon, you are crying. You don't know how you're going to survive this game anymore. Definitely if you resolved a bunch of Shadow Cloaks and for some reason you just didn't put this one in your drop because you forgot or whatever the case may be, then you damage check 1 and you don't run 2, you're in for a bad time. So I had to bump this up because of a bad experience at that tourney where I did damage check this card. Remember, these are both grade 1 orders, so they can resolve on your grade 2 turn. or a grade 1 turn if some odd scenario you have 2 orders in your drop zone already and have a damage. Alright. First grade 2 order I'm running is a Blitz order called Sin. This card is amazing because it is a Soul Blast 1 to draw 1 and it gains 5 for every order in your bind or drop zone. Fantastic. Nice little early game pressure. It can gain decent little amount of shield in the early game. But this pops off super hard in late game where it's just this gigantic 1-drop block, which is great. But the main thing that makes this card really good is it draws. But you do need to be careful of this Soul Blast. This can screw you over. Definitely in the prison matchup, they will take that soul. You're not going to use this. Okay, Wandering Souls. This is my last grade 2 order. So the thing with Wandering Souls is you have to pitch another order for its cost to give your Vanguard a drive check. This is a grade 2 order, so technically on your grade 2 turn you could resolve this if you meet the conditions. But I personally like to wait until my grade 3 turn to do this. It's Alchemagic, so I really just put a lot of oomph into it. I have a love-hate relationship with this. Flipping crits and getting more chances to flip crits is fantastic. But pitching an order from your hand to pay cost can lead to you playing vanilla Zorga, as I call it, where you don't have an order anymore, so you're just kind of swinging away and hoping it works out. I played 2 GDR. CB1 to give 3 units plus 10 is fantastic. You can really choose where you want this to go if that somehow matters, but in most cases you're just going to choose it as an additional front or persona right. You're just going to give it where each column gets plus 10, which is fantastic. Swing tall. This deck can't go wide, so it has to go tall. Also, I damage checked that at the turn. I cried. I hate damage checking my good orders. And then I run 1 copy of Black Magic. And it's literally a pot of greed. You get to draw 2 cards. Fantastic. Drawing 2 is nice. It's CB4, but its cost gets reduced for each bind card. So by turn 4, you could pretty much make this free. In turn 5, it's free. As long as you haven't used Bell yet, you can just go ahead and draw 2 cards. Fantastic. We like free cards. We like drawing cards. 1 copy of Regurgitation. I get to retire something. That's not common in Stockade to retire something. Saint Dragon Empire. So being able to do this is fantastic. There's not many key pieces in the game where like I really need to get rid of that 1 card and it will matter a whole lot. But being able to call 2 because I did does. This will help recreate a board in certain matchups where they either retire everything or soul charge everything. This will help me pay that Soul Blast cost and help me get my board back. Obviously, there's certain matchups like Prison where this isn't useful because either A, I won't have the soul, or B, all the rear guards I want to call is in their prison. Then finally, I do run 1 copy of Sound of Rain. It's literally a free version of Regurgitation, which is really nice in the prison matchup. But once again, most of my targets I want to call is probably in their prison, so this is more just a free retire. The call isn't as important because your opponent can play around it and choose like a grade 2, knowing you don't want to call it grade 2, or you don't have any grade 2s, or choose a grade 4. There's no grade 4 targets to call in this deck, so it is what it is. But once again, it's free. That's the whole point of this. You want to use your headhunters to make stuff free. Free card, bind up your orders, free card, use 1 headhunter, free. Pitch an order from hand. That's free. Your opponent can't really stop you from doing that as long as you save an order for its cost. Then this one is a CB1, 1 headhunter. It's free. These are the only 3 cost cards in your deck that you can't negate because they're Soul Blast effects. You can negate the Counter Blast, but you can't negate the Soul Blast. So you gotta be careful here. Your right line's already a Soul Blast 1, so you're already down 1. You need to be careful when you choose to resolve these. Definitely in the prison matchup, where these were more than likely dead or offline. That covers my orders. Quick note, when it comes to you damage checking an order, that's the reason why I'm running certain ones at higher ratios. I don't care if this gets damage checked. Sure, I miss a draw 2, but I'll be okay. These are just retiring cards, so if they get damage checked, that's fine. Same thing with this Blitz order. It sucks, but if they damage check it, it is what it is. If Spiritual Body gets damage checked, that sucks, but I'll be okay. I have other ways of calling cards. The damage check Wandering Souls, this kind of hurts. I like that triple drive. But there's times where this card's dead anyway, so it's fine. 2 copies of this card because I don't want to play a game without it. I need this card. Sure, I have a card that can send it to the drop zone. Shadow Cloak can send this, but there will be times where you don't have Shadow Cloak for some reason or another, or whatever the case may be, and you gotta run this as a 2-up. If you damage check 1 and you don't run this as a 2-up, you're gonna have a bad time. Same thing with GDR. If you damage check this, you're pretty much saying, hey, I'm losing 10k that I could be giving to my front row right now. So let's go over some additional options really quick for orders. So you have Wild Intelligence, which is a counterblast 1, mill 3 cards, call 1 normal unit from your drop zone, and if you play Magnolia, you can call 2 normal units from your drop zone. But this is Zorga, so we're only getting that 1 call. So the problem for me is I do not like the mill 3. I hate milling 3 cards. I'd much rather draw them. I don't want to just randomly lose my pieces. Since this deck can filter orders out, it normally just leaves normal units and triggers, so this effect can really hurt me, not help me. And that mill 3 will more than likely not actually set up my drop zone, it'll just make me lose pieces. Alright, you could run Nectar, 15 unit crit, but Prison Dragon kind of replaces this, and this is super late game since I don't run mill cards. Cheerful Malice for that free pop 2 to draw 1, soul charge, counter charge. It gives you a bunch of resources, and your opponent can't stop you from doing this. As long as you have 2 rear guards, you can do this, which is technically free, but I have a different card I'm running that does this without killing my board. I know you want to put Prison Dragons back and drop, but you can call over too. You're still, you don't necessarily need this to do that. Alright, and this is one of the last orders I'm going to show. Ghost Chase, Sin's just better, because your opponent can play around this. You don't want them to do that. The last order, which is Agony. Look at top 4, call 2, the other 2 go to drop. Whatever you called, gain 5. It has a nice little interaction where if you found this one, the one from hand, if it also called cards, they all gain 5, but I'm not running the grade 2 to negate Soul Blast cost, so I can't afford the 2 Soul Blasts for this. Now I'm done with the orders. Now time to move on to grade 1s. I run 4 copies of the PG. You need a PG stuff, definitely in this game where Brant Gate exists. You got a PG stuff. I run 4 copies of Headhunter Rogue. You gotta get those. Oh, sorry, Rogue Headhunter. You gotta get those free cards, man. This is an on placement to negate counterblast cost for Alchemagic. Fantastic. Then his other effect is if you Alchemagic, he gains 5. Amazing booster for Prison Dragon and our grade 2s that are all 10Ks. Fantastic. You have to remember though, his effects are both Alchemagic. It doesn't say orders, it says Alchemagic. Then I run 1 copy of Bell. So being able to drop your bind zone is cool, definitely when you want to reuse an order that went there, but we do run a card called Black Magic that eats bound cards. So you don't always need to resolve Bell, definitely since I am playing 2 copies of Unnatural Death and GDR, I don't necessarily need to see her. She's one of those cards where you just want to get into it and let her sit in a drop until you need her. Obviously playing her as a 2-up is also ideal, but space is tight and I wanted to try out another card, so I limited her down 1. But if you don't want to try that other card I'm running, you can just bump her up to 2. On placement, drop the bind, +5 for each. She is a 7k, be careful. There is also another grade 1 I would consider playing, which is Kusi. Slap him beyond your Vanguard, swinging for 28 with no other sources of power is fantastic, but limited deck space. If they up the amount of cards I could run, I would try this card as a 1-up, but space is a little too tight right now. So, on to the 2s. On to the 2s. I run 4 copies of Shadow Cloak. He has 2 effects. First effect is when he is placed from hand, I can send an order to my drop zone that does not already exist in my drop zone. And then his other effect is when he's on rearguard, when I Alchemagic, if he sees the Alchemagic, I can Soul Blast 1 and choose one of my other rearguards and return it to my hand. Then he also gains +5, which is nice. But the real play here is you want to have 2 dogs on your grade 2 turn and really put that pressure in and turbo out your orders so then you have all your options available. And then you don't even have to worry about running out of orders because of Unnatural Death being able to bounce orders back to you. And I run one more grade 2, 1 copy of Soul. So his effect states at the end of the turn, I'm sure. Yep. End of turn, if I Alchemagic or attack 4 more times, I can push him into the Soul and countercharge 1. So, I prioritize this over running Tearful Malice. I understand that this is at end of turn and not during main phase. But I also don't have to waste an order to achieve this. So I can get him on board to allow him to countercharge me a card whenever I Alchemagic, and he's a 10k. So then now I have an additional counterblast going into my next turn, definitely when you're sitting at 4 or 5 damage, and the reality is you're not trying to take an additional damage here, so this is just one more way to have one more attack happen without having to retire your board. And then the other way you can use this card is you can use it earlier in the game because of how much I'm rushing my opponent. They very quickly turn to just sniping my rear guards with all their attacks instead to damage deny me. Like, hey, if he has no counterblast, he can't hurt me. Well, true, but I try to make my deck free, and this is one free way to get a counterblast back to tell my opponent you tried. Alright. Some other grade 2s to be considered here is Fleet Swallower. Soul Blast 1, when you Alchemagic, he gains +5, and your opponent has to drop 2 to guard. Fantastic card, definitely when you barely squeak over a number, or he swings really low, whatever the case may be, or he swings really big and they're trying to PG it, now they gotta drop an extra card. Space is just really tight, and I've cut him out because Soul is a major problem, while Prison is in this game. Another grade 2 you could run is this one. This is mainly option in the Prison matchup if you're really scared of it. Being able to get a free Soul Charge 2 is fantastic. But I have 2 problems with her. That's her only effect. She's a 9k, so she makes her bad numbers and she becomes a vanilla. And then in any other matchup where you'll probably have at least 1 card in Soul, she doesn't help you. Alright. So that's it for other grade 2 options I would consider running. Oh, sorry, I missed one. So, if you love your Soul Blast orders, you could consider teching her in as well, but once again, space is quite limited. You will find yourself running her as a 1 to 2 up at the maximum, and honestly, most of the orders are just a Soul Blast 1, so I just choose to not play her at all, and I do not value the fact that she retires herself to negate Soul, and I also don't ever plan on using her on placement to mill 3 either, so I just feel like she is just not needed in the deck currently. Now the grade 3s. 3 Persona Rights. Persona Right is an amazing mechanic that is a little overtuned, I would say. Just for writing a card, you get +10 in a draw. It's pretty big. And the fact that any cards can abuse it. Unfortunately, Zorga can't because I don't Superior Call or anything, but, you know, other decks can. And finally, my last card in my deck, I run 3 copies of Prison Dragon. Prison Dragon is an amazing card. It is literally the reason why this deck is competitive, to be able to actually win a game through damage. He has 1 skill, Auto and Drop Zone. If I played in order, I can call him from the drop zone to rearguard, and he gets to choose +10 or 1 crit. Unless I Alchemagic, he gets both. But you also have to remember he is a 5k, so he needs a booster. That's where Headhunter comes in. Really make sure he hits good numbers. Okay, so the winning image for this deck is you swing with crits, and you swing tall. You have to remember here, Persona Ride +10. His own effect +10. plus grade 1 booster that gains +5. So already with this column alone, he's 15 plus 13 is 28 plus Persona Ride 38. Now we use our order plus an additional 10 to him in the third column. So plus another 10 on here. So you have 5, 15, 25, 35, plus 13, 48. With no triggers, he's swinging for 48. And that's saying you didn't use another order, like Spiritual Body, that could have gave an additional 5. And remember, that's not including triggers. I can easily hit a crit or a front trigger, or even the OT. Oh, let me lower it down a little bit. A crit, front, or the OT. And now he's swinging 58 or higher with just one trigger. So this gets really big. This is how I can win by damage. So early game, I'm opening up with Headhunters. So let's say that I lost the dice roll and I have to go second. You're looking at a double Headhunter play here to really poke your opponent, because they're just going to take it. They're praying for a defensive to stop the pokes. And then once you go grade 2, unless you have a Prison Dragon in order that can be played, at this point you're prioritizing a double dog play. And then on your grade 3 turn, you want to have a double prison played. And remember that this is a drop zone skill, so your following turn, if these are still unfilled, it doesn't help you. But remember what I said, where your opponent will try to starve you, some will still swing into the prisons and send them back for you. But if they don't and they choose to leave them unfilled, you just gotta call over, which is unfortunate. You know, that's why the Tearful Malice is a nice order for this. But it's not exactly the end of the world, calling over them. That's why you need to be careful, and that's why we run 3, because all I really need to do is call over 1, and if I have the other in the drop zone, boom, I got 2 ready to go, and it'll put that third one back. So there's a nice rotation there of circling the Prison Dragons. That's probably why people run them as a 4-up. Get 2 on board, get 2 and drop, and you can just rotate them every round. And of course, Prison's a thing, so you gotta be careful with Prison, but you'll learn those with matchups. You'll learn when to swap between. That pretty much wraps up my Zorga deck list here. If you want to know more about how I personally fared with the deck and any certain type of matchups, I'm willing to talk about it. Let me know in the comments below if you think I'm wrong or if there's something I need to be doing differently. Tell me how you feel about it. Definitely wanting some more interactions and how other people think about Zorga. And we will see if Zorga keeps topping and what happens in the future with our new Zorga support. Thank you for watching. Until next time.
Alright guys, y'all take care and thank you again for watching.